Hey everybody, it's Andrew with Natural State Horticare here, and today I wanted to make a quick video about diagnostics and how at Natural State Horticare we look at lawns when we see issues and we have client calls and maybe the issues aren't as obvious as we'd like them to be, and we have to play lawn detective to get to the bottom of it, and there can kind of be some compounding and confounding factors at play that we have to get to the bottom of. And so today we're going to go through a step-by-step process of how we get there. Okay, so there's a few things going on with this lawn, some obvious ones. Let's start with the most basic, the soil. So my first thought, whenever I get to a property and I see some struggle, my first thought is what's going on with the soil? What's the soil condition? Is it exposed? Is it hard? Is it dry? And if it checks some of those boxes, we need to look a little bit deeper, and probably the most practical way to do that is using a core tool or some sort of profiling tool or something like that. I happen to have a soil profiler here behind me. This is a really handy but expensive version. As a homeowner, you can just order a single core aerator tool off of Amazon for $20 to $50. So I'm going to show you what the expensive version does today, and we'll get a good look at this soil profile. But first, I want to show you just how hard this ground is. Okay, so let's talk about the profile itself. So as soon as I pulled this up, a few things became really obvious, and I think even on the camera, it'll still do it justice, that the absolute bottom of this profile is dry as a bone. And then as you go up, you can see the soil's pretty heavily clay-based. So clay is a really fine particle soil, and it tends to get compact really easily. We're in Central Arkansas. It's pretty much our primary soil type. We have a little bit of sandy loam, but a lot of clay. The other thing that stands out right away is that the root systems are non-existent. So this grass is really surviving in the less than the top inch of this soil. It is no wonder that this grass is struggling to come out of dormancy and to thrive. Without roots, grass doesn't do very well. And so there's a couple things happening here that make me want to look deeper at this problem. And one of those is the fact that we've been getting a substantial amount of rain lately from just natural rainfall. The irrigation system here is not running currently, but with the amount of rain, I'm actually kind of surprised that we're seeing such a dry profile. So let's dig a little bit deeper and find out what else is at play here. Okay, so when things don't add up and we see dry soil in a season when we're getting plenty of rainfall, we have to start looking at other things. So this is the area that we've been looking at, and you can see how thin the turf grass is here. And then as we pan back over here, you're gonna see where my head's going and why I might think that there's some other factors at play. So just over here, this is just off property. This is the neighbor's lawn here, just about 10 to 15 feet into the neighbor's lawn, underneath some oak trees, which is really correlative of a factor. It really plays a part. You'll see that there's big arc shapes of damage, and that's a disease we call fairy ring. So fairy ring really harms the soil itself. It's a unique disease. It's not just foliar based. It affects the structure of the soil, and it causes soil to become hydrophobic. Clay soil, silicate soil is really fine. It's already prone to hydrophobic nature. So when you combine it with a disease that destroys the structure of that soil, what it does is it kills off all the microbial life because it becomes so compact that it no longer transmits moisture and nutrients and oxygen through the profile. That kills off all the microbial life that was keeping that soil alive, and the structure of the soil itself begins to collapse in the areas affected by that disease. So there are additional compounding factors like the shade itself which weakens the grass, and then the slope of the land and the grade of this land and how the water will drain off this direction. So between the fairy ring, the slope, and the shade, you know, I'm not surprised at all that we're having trouble getting moisture and nutrients down to the profile of this soil. So the area that we've looked at already is a little bit more out and exposed to the sunlight, but as you get deeper into the shade and under more trees and between the houses, the issues start to compound even more. And then you get things that are not necessarily primary stressors, but secondary stressors. Things like zoysia mites, maybe even rust or things like that, that are often not the primary cause of any damage, but secondary to stress that's actually already happening from something else. So let's take a quicker look at this area here specifically that I think is a little chlorotic and being affected by mites, drainage, and all sorts of stuff. Okay, so we've talked about things like fairy ring, the slope and the grade of the land, compaction, erosion, things like that, that are all playing a role into what we were seeing out here and why this grass is struggling. But let's talk about another factor that's really interesting, and that's context. And it can't be understated. So when the homeowner gives me relevant background information, it really helps diagnosis. So this homeowner explained to me that this lawn was kind of sodded in multiple phases. So the immediate phase right behind me was sodded about 1.5 years ago. And then even more recently than that, there was some sod laid back there. There was also some work done in the back, some AC units installed, so a lot of foot traffic and things like that, that further lead to the diagnosis of compaction and things like that being what's causing this grass to suffer. One more factor that cannot be ignored is grass type. So interestingly enough, and this lawn is a perfect example of this, of how different grass types hold up to different stresses differently. So what we've been talking about and looking at so far is almost exclusively zoysia grass, but here about this transition line, maybe 5 to 6 feet behind me, is the transition into Bermuda grass. So Bermuda grass is a great full sun turf grass here in central Arkansas that holds up to a lot of different stresses like compaction, like drainage issues, drought stress, foot traffic, you name it. It's a little bit hardier. However, it absolutely has to be in full sun, which is why the homeowner chose to sod in Bermuda or zoysia grass behind me and as we get into the shadier area. So great choice, but it does come with some trade-offs. Okay, so we've kind of gone over why things might be struggling and diagnosing and how we get there and how different factors have to be considered, like context, slope, grade, shade, adjacent diseases, trees affect everything. So we've kind of covered that gamut. Now we have to talk about solutions. So the solutions here in this particular case, obviously when you have compaction, core aeration is king. However, in central Arkansas, there's been some recent litigation and law changes and things like that that honestly made it no longer worth it financially for us with the liability. So we switched over to liquid aeration. It is a really unique version of liquid aeration with premium products and soil moisture managers and humic acids and kelps and things like that that help proliferation down through the soil profile. So it's actually a really interesting approach. Not quite the same as core aeration, but still an amazing tool in the tool belt and one that really can't be ignored whenever you're dealing with this kind of issue. Again, if you're willing to take that on as a homeowner, the liabilities are a lot less risky for you. So definitely feel free to do core aeration. But in terms of commercially, liquid aeration is a great option or alternative to core aeration. Now, again, when we're talking about DIY and things that you can do yourself, one of the best things you can do is in an area like this where the soil itself is suffering is top dress. So add some good soil. You're not going to be able to add an enormous amount of soil all at once. You'll actually choke your grass out. So you have to be careful and add it lightly over time. You can do this several times throughout the season. I always recommend doing any top dressing like immediately after a mow. So when your grass is the tightest and the closest to the ground, not long and stringy, okay, you could top dress. But if you top dress when the grass is long, it can lay over and rot and cause other issues. So the grass today is pretty low. We're thin even in some of these areas. So we're gonna get started, and I'm gonna kind of go over and show you guys exactly what top dressing looks like. Okay, so I've got some of the topsoil dumped out here, and technically this is a potting soil, but it's nice and light and compact and easy to work with, which honestly, as a homeowner, is about as important as anything. Just make sure it's a high quality soil, and keep in mind that the more potting soil versions of soil that you use, they are gonna be lighter, so they are gonna be more prone to erosion. One thing that you can add that we don't have here today would be sand. Sand is a self-leveling type product that if you get the right sand, if you get clean sand, it can actually be really beneficial to mix in at maybe an 80-20 ratio even, about 80% sand, 20% compost or potting soil, whatever you have. And the deeper the hole, the more you lean towards compost and potting soil being the dominant mix versus the sand, and the flatter, the more sand to compost. Make sure not to leave any piles. You don't want to choke that grass out. Okay, so to conclude things, the last step in this process to address this hydrophobic dry soil issue, after we top dress, we're gonna wanna run the irrigation. If you don't have irrigation, break out the sprinkler. But in this case, we got the system running. Gonna give it a good, thorough soaking. However, hydrophobic soil is gonna have a lot of difficulty accepting much moisture in one rotation. We really recommend irrigation be done in a cycle and soak scenario where you allow the water to soak in and run your system through multiple start times a day. So if you want to water for 30 minutes, you break it up into 10-minute cycles. So that's for a separate video. We offer an irrigation service called Optimizations, but that's a professional service that we offer. If you want to just give it a quick Google on cycle and soak and type in the name of your controller, it's not that complicated. But anyway, guys, so that's kind of wrapping it up. We got to diagnose and we go through the process. We eliminate variables. We think about the context, what the client has told us about the history of the property, the conditions, everything from shade to slope. The grass types also matter. But ultimately, when you're looking at any one issue, diagnosing is a very important part of the process. This solution just happened to be one where it was chemical free. We didn't really have to get involved here. It's safe. You can't hurt anything with compost. It's a very homeowner friendly solution. So we encourage you guys to take a look at your soil, take a full profile and look at it, look at the structure. And oftentimes common sense is gonna give you the answer. So, all right guys, thanks. We'll do this again soon.